Thank you for that. Thank you, Mary, for having us, organizing this, the other poets for sharing your wonderful work, and everybody for coming out this afternoon. Just read a few poems. I'll begin with a very short poem called Letter, which is exactly what it was, something that I sent to somebody who was struggling a bit. Letter. Tonight, as you walk out into the stars, or the forest, or the city, look up as you must have looked before love came, before love went, before ash was ash. Look at them, the city's mists, the winters, and the moon's glass you must have touched once in beginning. That new moon you must have touched once in the waters, saying, change me, change me, change me. All I want is to be more of what I am. This is a poem. It's about 10 years old now, and it's something of a persona poem, which is to say it is and is not in the voice of the composer Gustav Mahler, which is to say it is and is not in the voice of me. Mahler in New York. Now when I go out, the wind pulls me into the grave. I go out to part the hair of a child I left behind, and he pushes his face into my cuffs to smell the wind. If I carry my father with me, it is the way a horse carries autumn in its mane. If I remember my brother, it is as if a buck had knelt down in a room I was in. I kneel, and the wind kneels down in me. What is it to have a history, a flock buried in the blindness of winter? Try crawling with two violins into the hallway of your father's hearse. It is filled with sparrows. Sometimes I go to the field, and the field is bare. There is the wind which entrusts me. There is a woman walking with a pail of milk, a man who tilts his bread in the sun. There is the black heart of a mare in the milk. Or is it the wind, the way it goes? I don't know about the wind, about the way it goes. All I know is that sometimes someone will pick up the black violin of his childhood and start playing. That it sits there on his shoulder like a thin, gray falcon asleep in its blinders, and that we carry each other this way because it is the way we would like to be carried, sometimes with mercy, sometimes without. This is a poem called The Figure. You sit at a window and listen to your father crossing the dark grasses of the fields toward you. A moon soaking through his shoes as he shuffles the wind aside. The night in his hands like an empty bridle. How long have we been this way? You ask him. It must be ages, the wind answers. It must be the music of the wind turning your fingers to glass, turning the furniture of childhood to the colors of horses, turning them away. Your father is still crossing the acres, a light on his tongue like a small coin from an empire that has always been ruined. Now the dark flocks are drifting through his shoulders with an odor of lavender, an odor of gold. Now he has turned as though to go, but only knelt down with the heavy oars of October on his forearms to begin the horrible rowing. You sit in a chair in the room. The wind lies open on your lap like the score of a life you did not measure. You rise. You turn back to the room and repeat what you know. The earth is not a home. The night is not an empty bridle in the hands of a man crossing a field with a new moon in his old wool. We abandon the dead. We abandon them. I'll read a few more poems. It's a short little poem called Migrations. When the time has come to find a new holiness in things, you can listen. Listen. High up in the cold wind, you can hear them, breathless, going where they have to go. Oh, stranger, where are you going in this one world? Where in this morning light that opens? Look at you. Look at us, parting. I promise you we will meet again. I, too, once stood at the door of the wilds of my life. Go in. I'm trying to save paper these days. My students yell at me for wasting it all the time. So I'm reading from my device here. This is a sonnet. I'll just read a few more. This is a sonnet about finding love well after the reckless idealism of one's 20s. It's called The Middle of the Way. And now the same blank moon is on the yards. A man looks out a window to the stars and asks himself if anyone escapes the blinding fires of childhood, the endless scars of all the long-gone ghosts, their hands of flame. A woman calls a child home at dusk, forgetting that the name she calls is hers. 30 years ago, she let it hush its one wild song, that it might come inside. This is how it is. No way to turn, no promise in the dark. And yet, by God, someone hears a calling in the night and stumbles like a drunkard through the stars and throws open the barn doors of the heart. I wrote that for my new fiance. We just got engaged a couple days ago. What shall I read to you? This is a poem that is very much a, well, I won't introduce the form of it. I'll let the form speak for itself. I've gotten in the habit of saying much less between my poems. Kind of tired of my own voice. I'd just rather read. It's a poem called Hymn, Hymn. We are like strangers in the wild places. We watch the deer swinging the intricate velvet from its antlers, never knowing we are only as immense as what we shed in the dance. The bride and bridegroom stand at the altar. Each thing learned in mercy has a river in it. It holds the cargo of 1,000 crafts of fire that went down at evening. We can neither endure our misfortunes nor face the remedies needed to cure them. The fawns move through the forest, and we move through the ruins of the dance. Like Job, the mourner lays his head on the cold oak of the table. His heart is 100 calla lilies under the muck of the river, opening before evening. We think there is another shore. We stand with the new life like a mooring rope across our shoulders, never guessing that the staying is the freightage of the dance. Orpheus turned to see his Eurydice gone. The The Furies tore him into pieces. The sun, he cried, I will worship the sun. But something in his ruin cried out for evening, evening, evening. The wrens build at dusk. Friends, I love their moss-dressed nests twisting in the pitch of the rafters, for they have taught me that the ruins of the dance are the dance. Yeats speaks about the other world existing in an intensified version of the world that we live in. I've always been suspicious of poetry that aims to get away from this world. Frost says, Earth's the right place for love. I don't know where it's likely to go better. Coda. Now I watch my father turn and walk out to the pastures where his mares are. Alone, he lets his hands drift over the deep chords in their bodies, closing his blind eyes to that music. The wind wades in dark boots from the orchard, steadying his shoulder through his hard time. Now he is listening for beginning. Now he is lying among that sinew, asking as a boy would where his song goes. But he knows, he knows, he knows. He knows as long as love runs, it is earth song. It is wild to be ridden in its irons to another world, this one. And I'll just read one last poem, I think, which is called Odysseus, and we know his story. Tried quite some time to get home. The Greek poet Constantine Cavafy has a beautiful poem called Ithaca. I don't know if anybody knows that poem, in which it's hard to summarize poems, and one shouldn't do it, but the journey is really the truth. Odysseus. Of course, he's recognized when he comes home by his nurse, when he has a wound on him. Odysseus, think of the moment, before recognition, before the nurse saw the boar's scar coursing down his thigh where the world had first entered him in the forests of childhood, before Penelope, before his battle for her heart. Think of his moment alone on the shore, his sailors running up to the village where girls stood wringing spices from their hair. Think of the gods saying to him, you do not have to praise ruin anymore. You do not have to praise what is lost. How you imagine him is how you enter things. He is kneeling, or he is weeping, or he is turning toward the sea again, thinking of the great deeds of the hopeless. Think of him lifting the sands and touching them to his tongue to see if it is real, if it is home, if it is time. Think of the moment before he knew he had stepped out of the myths and into his life. Whether that means to you that he would sing or mourn or be lessened. And his patience when he rose up again and took himself the long way toward his kingdom, not knowing if it had all changed, or if love had lasted, or if anything can last. Think of him as though he were your life, as though you had sat waiting at a loom for long, dark years, weaving and unweaving what you are. Think of your life returning to you with eyes that had seen death. And whether you would look away, if you saw him pausing a moment among the gardens and the horses, listening to the song of each thing, the common things he had forgotten. Think of him hearing your voice again, hiding his face in his hands as he listened, hearing a music of losses and joys, pestilence and bounty, a beauty that had prepared a place for him. And whether you would have him be changed by that, or return to what he was, or become what he had come this way to become. Thank you very much.